Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I invite you to journey with me into a truth that is both simple and profound. So often we struggle against life, demanding it follow our wishes, insisting it move to the rhythm of our desires. Yet life has its own rhythm, a deeper cadence that guides us, shapes us, and reveals who we truly are. When we learn to walk in harmony with this rhythm, something extraordinary happens. Peace enters our hearts, strength is born from within, and the path of self-discovery opens before us. Life will not conform to our desires, it exists to transform us. This is a truth that can feel almost unbearable when we first encounter it. From childhood, we are often taught, directly or indirectly, that if we want something badly enough, if we hold to it tightly enough, life will grant it to us. We are told to chase dreams, to believe in the power of intention, to imagine that reality will bend around our will. And for a time, this belief can carry us. It gives us fuel, determination, even hope. Yet eventually, life reminds us of its own nature. It is not a servant of our wishes, not a mirror of our fantasies. It does not move in straight lines or adjust itself to our plans. Its task is far greater, far deeper, to shape us, to break us when needed, and to build us into something we could not yet imagine ourselves becoming. When we resist this truth, frustration takes root. We imagine that something has gone wrong when events unfold against our wishes. We fall into the illusion that we are being punished or abandoned by the very life we are trying to live. But in reality, life is simply fulfilling its role. The setbacks, the failures, the closed doors, these are not the evidence of neglect, but the chisels of transformation. A sculptor cannot bring a statue into being without striking away the excess stone. In the same way, life chips at us, removing what does not belong, refining what remains until we are closer to the shape we were meant to take. This process can feel cruel when we are in the midst of it. Our desires, after all, are born from our immediate perspective. We want comfort, ease, recognition, or control because these things seem to promise stability. Yet life is rarely interested in stability. It is interested in growth, in the expansion of our being, in the deepening of our soul. And growth almost always requires the discomfort of shedding old skins, letting go of attachments, and walking through darkness we would rather avoid. Think of the times when everything aligned with what you wanted. Perhaps it felt blissful for a while, like life had finally obeyed your call. But how long did it last before change swept in again? Life cannot remain still, and even when it grants us the sweetness of fulfilled desire, it does so only briefly. It is not to mock us, but to remind us that desire is not the end point. Desire is a spark, but transformation is the fire. The transformation that life demands is not superficial. It does not ask us to merely polish the surface or to collect achievements like trophies. It asks us to dig deeper, to confront our shadows, to unlearn illusions, and to discover strength where we once saw only weakness. It demands that we grow beyond who we currently are, even if that means losing what we thought we could not live without. And in that loss, a new dimension of self arises, one that could never have been born if life had simply handed us everything we wanted. There is a paradox in this truth. The more tightly we cling to our desires, the more life seems to resist them. Yet when we loosen our grip, when we stop demanding that reality obey us, something shifts. We begin to notice the hidden currents guiding us toward places we would not have chosen, but which ultimately shape us more profoundly than our desires ever could. It is as if life waits for our surrender, and in that surrender, its deeper meaning becomes visible. To live with this awareness is to approach existence with humility. It is to recognize that while we may dream, plan, and strive, we are not the masters of the unfolding. We are participants in a greater movement, one that has been sculpting souls long before us and will continue long after. Our task is not to force life into alignment with our small vision, but to align ourselves with the vast vision that life holds for us. When life does not conform, it is not betraying us, it is refining us, it is teaching us patience, resilience, compassion, and depth. It is stripping away illusions so that we may stand closer to truth. And though the journey may wound us, those wounds become the very openings through which light enters. In time, we may look back and realize that the moments we once cursed were the very moments that carried us into a greater version of ourselves. The path denied was the path that would have kept us small. The desire unmet was the doorway to a richer understanding. Life knew what we could not. It always does. And while it will never bend itself fully to our will, it will always bend us toward the growth we secretly longed for, even if we did not know it. Resistance to reality deepens suffering and entangles us further. This truth is one of the hardest for the human mind to accept, because we are wired to want control, to crave certainty, and to imagine that if we struggle hard enough, we can bend life to our expectations. When events unfold in ways that clash with our desires, our instinct is often to fight, to push back, to demand that reality change. Yet what we discover is that this resistance does not free us. It binds us. It multiplies the weight of what we are carrying. It transforms natural pain into prolonged suffering and simple challenges into unbearable burdens. Reality, as it stands, has no obligation to our wishes. It does not pause to negotiate with our preferences. A storm will come whether or not we are ready. A loss will occur whether or not we approve. A change will arrive whether or not we have prepared space for it. But when we resist these inevitabilities, we suffer twice. Once from the event itself, and again from our refusal to accept it. It is as though we step into quicksand, and rather than finding stillness, we thrash with all our might, only to sink deeper. Resistance ties us to the very thing we are trying to escape. Consider the way grief works. When loss enters our lives, the pain is real and unavoidable. Yet many people resist it. They deny the reality of what has happened, or they refuse to feel the sorrow because they believe it will overwhelm them. In doing so, they prolong their suffering. The grief does not leave. It festers, it hides, it emerges in unexpected ways. By resisting reality, they become entangled with it, bound by the very truth they will not face. Acceptance, painful as it is, allows the wound to breathe, and only then can healing begin. The same is true with fear. When fear arises, our instinct is often to resist, to suppress it, to pretend it does not exist. Yet suppression only strengthens what we try to avoid. The fear grows larger in the shadows, feeding on the energy of our denial. We become trapped in cycles of anxiety, unable to move forward because we have not allowed ourselves to face the source directly. Resistance deepens the hold of fear, whereas meeting it with awareness begins to loosen its grip. This entanglement also shows itself in our relationships. When we demand that others be different from who they are, when we resist their reality, we do not bring peace, we create conflict. We fight battles of control, arguments without end, and cycles of disappointment. The more we resist what is true about another, the more enmeshed we become in frustration. Only when we release the demand for them to conform to our vision can we begin to relate with clarity, compassion, and authenticity. At the heart of resistance lies an illusion, the belief that fighting reality will somehow change it. But reality does not yield to denial. It remains unmoved by our tantrums, untouched by our objections. In resisting, we expend enormous energy but achieve no transformation. That energy, trapped in the loop of "this should not be," becomes poison to the soul. It keeps us bound to pain that could have been a teacher, to change that could have been liberating, to truths that could have deepened our wisdom. There is a quiet paradox in all of this. When we stop resisting, the suffering lessens, even though the situation itself may remain unchanged. The storm still rages, but we no longer waste ourselves fighting the wind. Instead, we anchor, we adapt, we bend like the tree that survives by yielding rather than breaking. The reality we once fought against becomes something we can work with, something we can learn from, something that ultimately transforms us. Resistance also blinds us to hidden meaning. When we are consumed by the battle against what is, we cannot see beyond the struggle. Our minds are filled with anger, denial, or despair. But when acceptance enters, clarity follows. We begin to notice lessons that were invisible before, connections we could not see, and strengths we did not know we carried. What once felt like an enemy begins to reveal itself as a guide. To live without resistance is not to live without feeling. Pain will still come, fear will still arise, loss will still break us open. But by allowing reality to be what it is, we prevent suffering from multiplying beyond necessity. We grant ourselves the freedom to move through, rather than remain stuck within. In this way, acceptance does not remove the weight of existence, but it does untangle us from unnecessary knots, making the burden lighter to carry. In the end, it is not reality that entangles us, but our struggle against it. It is not life itself that chains us, but our refusal to let it unfold as it must. And the day we stop resisting, the day we allow ourselves to meet life on its own terms, is the day we begin to discover the quiet liberation we had been seeking all along. Acceptance is not resignation, it is the courage to face reality with open eyes. Too often people confuse the two, believing that to accept something is to give up, to surrender their agency, or to abandon their hopes. But true acceptance is something far deeper, far braver, and far more transformative. Resignation is born from despair, a collapse of the spirit, an unwillingness to try any longer. Acceptance, on the other hand, is born from clarity. It is the willingness to see life exactly as it is, without distortion, without denial, and without the comforting veil of illusion. To accept reality is not to give up on living, it is to begin living from a place of truth. When we resign, we say to ourselves, "There is nothing left for me here," and we shrink away from engagement. But when we accept, we whisper, "This is how things are," and in that whisper lies the seed of transformation. Acceptance requires immense courage because reality often carries truths we would rather not face. It may reveal that a relationship has ended, that a dream has collapsed, that a certain path is no longer possible. These revelations sting, and the temptation is strong to deny them, to resist them, or to look away. Yet the cost of denial is far greater than the sting of truth. Denial binds us to illusions that cannot sustain us. Only acceptance clears the ground for something new to emerge. To accept with open eyes means to allow ourselves to feel the full weight of what is happening, even when it breaks us open. It means looking directly at loss without flinching, standing in the midst of failure without excuses, and meeting our own limitations without shame. Such honesty is painful, but it is also liberating, for when we stop pretending, when we stop running, we find that the strength we feared we did not have was waiting for us all along. Resignation closes doors, acceptance opens them. The one who resigns believes they have reached the end. But the one who accepts discovers that every end is also a beginning. By facing reality, we create the conditions for growth, for adaptation, for renewal. A person who accepts the death of an old identity, for instance, makes space for a new self to be born. A person who accepts the collapse of certainty begins to discover resilience, creativity, and faith. Think of the tree in winter. It does not resign itself to death when its leaves fall. It accepts the cycle, the barrenness, the cold. It does not resist the season, nor does it collapse in despair. Instead, it gathers its strength in stillness, waiting, preparing for renewal. Acceptance is much the same. It does not mean we enjoy the season we are in, nor does it mean we cease to hope for spring. It means we are willing to live honestly in the present moment, however harsh it may be, trusting that life still moves forward. In this way, acceptance does not weaken us, it strengthens us. It asks us to walk through fire with our eyes open, to embrace the uncertainty of existence without demanding that it conform to our will. It allows us to stop fighting battles we cannot win, and instead redirect our energy toward the places where change is possible. Acceptance does not say, "I am powerless." It says, "I choose to see clearly, and from this clarity I will act." Nigh of the greatest transformations in human lives begin not in triumph, but in acceptance. The moment we stop denying the pain, we can begin to heal. The moment we stop insisting that others change, we can begin to grow in compassion. The moment we stop clinging to the past, we can finally step into the present. None of this is resignation. It is the deepest form of courage, for it demands that we remain awake when sleep would be easier, that we remain open when closure would feel safer, that we remain honest when illusion would be more comfortable. To accept reality with open eyes is to participate fully in life, not as we wish it to be, but as it truly is. And from this participation, from this grounded awareness, we find a freedom that resignation could never offer, for resignation is the death of possibility, but acceptance is its birth. Acceptance does not erase pain, it transforms its role in our lives. Instead of being an enemy to escape, pain becomes a teacher to learn from. The broken heart, once accepted, shows us the depths of love we were capable of. The failure, once accepted, reveals the limits of our illusions and the places where we need to grow. The loss, once accepted, carves out a space in us for compassion, humility, and a greater understanding of impermanence. The suffering remains real, but through acceptance, it gains context, and in context, it gains significance. Think of grief. In the early days, grief feels meaningless, like a cruel weight pressing down on every breath. But when we accept the reality of what has been lost, grief begins to transform. It does not stop hurting, but it begins to remind us of love, of connection, of the fragile beauty of existence. The very ache becomes proof of the bond that once was. In that recognition, grief is reshaped into meaning. The pain itself becomes a form of memory, a quiet testament to what mattered most. Or consider failure. When resisted, failure feels humiliating, a verdict on our worth. We replay mistakes, argue with outcomes, and exhaust ourselves in denial. But once we accept failure, it ceases to be an indictment and becomes instruction. It reveals truths about our limitations, our blind spots, and our need for growth. Many of the greatest achievements in history were born from failures that, through acceptance, became the foundation for new paths. Pain in the form of failure reshaped itself into wisdom, and wisdom became the doorway to possibility. The transformation of pain into meaning requires courage because acceptance asks us to stand in the full light of what has happened without escape. It demands that we stop wishing things were different and begin to live with what is. In that moment, pain ceases to be a wall and becomes a bridge. It connects us to the deeper layers of ourselves, to our resilience, to our capacity for empathy. What once felt like destruction begins to reveal itself as initiation, a rite of passage into a broader understanding of life. There is also a paradox hidden here. The more we resist pain, the longer it lasts and the more meaningless it feels. But when we stop resisting and let it flow through us, it begins to integrate into the story of who we are. A scar on the body can remain visible for a lifetime, but over time, it is no longer a symbol of harm. It becomes a reminder of survival. The same is true of the scars carried within. They do not vanish, but through acceptance, they are redefined. Acceptance does not make suffering desirable, nor does it romanticize struggle. Instead, it reveals that even in suffering, life is offering us something, a deeper perspective, a sharper awareness, a chance to discover what lies beneath the surface of our ordinary selves. Pain, in this light, is not meaningless chaos. It is a sculptor's hand, chiseling us into forms we could not have imagined for ourselves. To accept is to allow pain to sit with us, to let it breathe, to recognize it as part of our journey, rather than a detour from it. And in that recognition, the pain that once threatened to destroy us begins to contribute to our becoming. It becomes part of our strength, part of our wisdom, part of the meaning we carry forward. Through acceptance, pain is no longer a thief of joy, but a strange companion on the path toward depth and wholeness. Wounds can become teachers when we stop denying them. Every wound, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, carries within it a message. At first, the message is hidden beneath raw pain, shame, or confusion. We want to look away, to cover it, to pretend it never happened. Denial becomes our instinctive response, because acknowledging the wound feels like reopening it again and again. Yet wounds that are ignored do not vanish. They linger in silence, shaping us in ways we do not understand. It is only when we pause, when we dare to face them directly, that the deeper lessons within them begin to reveal themselves. When a wound is denied, it festers. The hurt we refuse to confront does not dissolve. It burrows into the unconscious, influencing our thoughts, our choices, and our relationships. We repeat patterns without knowing why. We find ourselves triggered by moments that seem small to others but feel overwhelming to us. The wound we hide in denial continues to guide us, but it guides us blindly. The moment we stop denying it, however, we shift from being unconsciously driven by it to consciously learning from it. The wound becomes less of a dictator and more of a teacher. Pain often contains truths that comfort could never reveal. A betrayal, when faced, can teach us about trust, boundaries, and the complexity of human nature. Failure, when accepted, can teach us humility, resilience, and the art of beginning again. Loss, when acknowledged, can teach us about love, impermanence, and the fragility of life. These lessons are rarely welcome in the moment of wounding. They feel harsh, even cruel. But when we stop denying what has happened, we create the possibility of transformation. The wound becomes not only a scar to carry, but also a map of the wisdom we have gained. There is a certain depth that comes only through wounds. People who have never faced significant pain often live on the surface, skimming along without ever diving into the depths of themselves. But those who have endured wounds and faced them without denial carry a gravity, a presence that cannot be faked. They see life differently. They speak with a quiet authority that comes not from books or theories, but from the lived experience of being broken and reshaped. Their wounds have taught them what no external teacher could. It is important to see that allowing wounds to teach us does not mean glorifying suffering or pretending that pain is inherently good. The wound itself is still painful, still unjust at times, still difficult to bear. But within that pain lies potential. The wound is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new chapter. Denial freezes the story in place, leaving us stuck in an unfinished moment. Acceptance allows the story to move forward, allowing the wound to evolve from harm into wisdom. Think of the way the body heals. When we deny an injury and refuse to treat it, infection can set in, spreading harm far beyond the initial wound. But when we clean it, tend to it, and allow it to breathe, the body begins its natural process of healing. The scar that remains is not only a reminder of pain, but a testament to survival. The same is true of inner wounds. They must be acknowledged, tended to, and brought into the light of awareness. Then, over time, they cease to be raw injuries and instead become marks of resilience. Our wounds can also connect us more deeply to others. When we deny them, we often build walls, trying to appear whole when we feel broken. But when we face them honestly, we discover that others too carry wounds of their own. In that shared vulnerability, compassion arises. Our wounds teach us empathy, reminding us that pain is universal and that understanding another person often begins with understanding our own brokenness. The greatest teachers in life are rarely the moments of ease or success. More often, they are the wounds that carved into us, demanding that we pause, reflect, and grow. Denial silences those teachers, but acceptance allows their voices to be heard. To sit with a wound, to ask it what it has to reveal, is to begin a dialogue with life itself. And though the answers may not come quickly, they always come in time, reshaping not only how we see the world, but how we see ourselves. Failures are not verdicts, they are foundations for growth. Yet in the heat of the moment, when failure stares us in the face, it feels final, humiliating, even destructive. We interpret it as a judgment against our worth, a sign that we are not capable, not deserving, not enough. The sting of failure burns deeply, not only because of the loss itself, but because of the meaning we attach to it. We see it as a verdict that defines us, a conclusion that ends the story. But failure, when understood through the lens of growth, is never an ending. It is a beginning disguised in difficulty, a foundation upon which something stronger, wiser, and more enduring can be built. Every failure contains a lesson that success cannot offer. Success often validates what we already know, but failure exposes the gaps, the blind spots, the illusions we carry. It strips away the false sense of certainty and forces us to confront our limitations. Though painful, this confrontation is the soil of growth. Without it, we would remain stagnant, endlessly repeating the same patterns without awareness. Failure interrupts those patterns, shattering the comfort of assumption and opening the door to transformation. Think of a child learning to walk. Each fall is technically a failure, yet no one interprets it as a verdict against the child's potential. Instead, each stumble is seen as part of the learning, part of the process by which balance, coordination, and strength develop. The same principle applies throughout life. Our failures, no matter how large or small, are steps in a longer process of growth. But unlike the child, we as adults often lose patience with ourselves. We treat a stumble as proof of inadequacy rather than as part of the journey toward mastery. Failure can also be a mirror. It reflects back to us the ways in which we are misaligned with our true path. Sometimes what we perceive as failure is actually life's way of redirecting us away from something that would not serve us. A job not secured, a plan that collapses, a dream that refuses to materialize. These experiences feel crushing in the moment, yet often they are guiding us towards something more fitting, something more authentic. Failure, then, is not always a sign of weakness. It is sometimes the compass that points us back toward what is essential. To accept loneliness is not to glorify isolation or to deny the human need for connection. It is simply to acknowledge the truth that loneliness is part of the human experience, one that no person can fully escape. There are times in life when even in a crowded room we feel alone. There are seasons when the bonds we once relied upon fall away, when relationships end, when companionship fades. These moments can feel cruel, as though life has withdrawn its warmth. Yet within that stillness lies the possibility of encountering ourselves in a way that no external company could provide. When we stop fleeing from loneliness and allow it to be present, we begin to discover what rests beneath the silence. We hear the subtle voice of our own inner being, a voice that is often drowned out by the noise of constant activity and endless social entanglement. In solitude, when loneliness is accepted, we are brought face to face with ourselves. Not the roles we play, not the masks we wear, but the raw presence of who we are when no one is watching. Though uncomfortable at first, this encounter is the beginning of true strength, because strength that is built on external validation is fragile, but strength that grows from inner grounding cannot easily be shaken. Loneliness, in its accepted form, teaches us how to stand without leaning, how to walk without constant support, how to breathe without needing someone else to affirm our existence. It does not erase the desire for love, friendship, or companionship, but it removes the desperation that often clings to those desires. It teaches us that we can endure even in silence, that our worth does not depend on being constantly surrounded or affirmed. This realization plants the seeds of resilience. There is a profound difference between loneliness resisted and loneliness embraced. Resisted loneliness becomes bitterness, a restless hunger that cannot be satisfied. Embraced loneliness becomes stillness, a fertile ground where creativity, insight, and wisdom take root. Many of the world's greatest works of art, philosophy, and spiritual insight were born in moments of solitude, when the soul, undistracted by the clamor of society, turned inward and discovered new worlds. The strength that grows in such solitude is not loud or boastful. It is quiet, steady, and enduring. Loneliness also teaches us about the nature of connection itself. When we accept it, we stop expecting others to fill a void that only we can tend. We stop demanding that relationships erase our inner emptiness and instead approach them as spaces for sharing rather than clinging. In this way, acceptance of loneliness makes us more capable of genuine love. We no longer approach others out of desperation, but out of fullness, out of the strength cultivated in solitude. The fear of loneliness often comes from the assumption that being alone means being incomplete. But when loneliness is embraced, it reveals that we are already whole, even without constant external affirmation. This discovery does not make us indifferent to others, but it frees us from dependency. It allows us to stand strong in our individuality while still remaining open to connection. Ultimately, loneliness, when accepted, is not a barren state but a transformative one. It teaches us to meet ourselves with honesty, to discover the resources hidden within, and to cultivate a strength that endures even when the world feels distant. In this fertile ground, inner strength grows not as a shield against life, but as a steady presence, enabling us to move through life with resilience, clarity, and a deeper sense of self. Every difficulty holds the raw material needed for personal transformation. At first glance, hardship often appears as nothing more than an obstacle, a cruel twist of fate, or a burden we wish to escape. We are quick to label difficulties as misfortunes, as setbacks that derail us from the life we envisioned. Yet beneath the surface of every challenge lies an unseen gift, a reservoir of potential that, if approached with awareness, becomes the very substance through which growth and transformation are made possible. What appears to be resistance is in truth the shaping force of the soul. Difficulty acts as a mirror. It reflects to us the places where we are weak, unprepared, or in need of change. In moments of ease, we glide through life without question, unaware of the deeper layers within ourselves. But when life tightens its grip, when obstacles block our way, we are forced to confront what lies hidden in our depths. The discomfort of difficulty compels us to look inward, to acknowledge the fears, doubts, and unresolved patterns we often prefer to avoid. In this confrontation, the raw material for transformation begins to surface. Consider the way metal is forged. It is placed into fire, hammered, and shaped repeatedly until it becomes strong, resilient, and refined. Without the fire, without the hammer, the metal remains formless and fragile. In much the same way, human character is shaped in the furnace of difficulty. The heat of adversity exposes our brittleness, but also provides the conditions through which resilience is formed. It is within that very process that transformation begins to take root. Every difficulty contains within it a lesson that could not have been learned otherwise. It may be the lesson of patience in a season of waiting, the lesson of humility in a time of loss, or the lesson of courage when fear stands in our way. These lessons are rarely welcome, but they are essential. They push us beyond the surface of life and into the depths of meaning. Difficulty demands that we expand our capacity, stretch beyond the limitations of comfort, and develop qualities that ease could never cultivate. Personal transformation does not emerge from comfort, but from friction. A seed must break apart before it can grow into a tree. A caterpillar must dissolve into seeming nothingness before it can emerge as a butterfly. In the same way, the struggles we endure break apart the rigid structures of who we once were, dissolving what no longer serves us and making space for something greater to emerge. What looks like destruction is often the first stage of renewal. When we begin to see difficulties in this light, we realize that they are not meaningless interruptions to life, but essential threads in the fabric of our becoming. The heartbreak that shatters us may also awaken us to compassion. The failure that humbles us may ignite a deeper perseverance. The loss that empties us may open us to a fuller sense of life. Each struggle brings with it the raw materials, patience, humility, resilience, empathy, and wisdom that are required for us to grow into our fuller selves. Transformation, however, does not occur simply because difficulty appears. It occurs when we engage with it consciously, when we choose to face it rather than run from it. Avoidance leaves the raw material untouched, like stone left uncarved. But when we lean into the challenge, when we wrestle with its meaning, we begin to uncover the shape that lies hidden within. In this way, difficulty is not the enemy, it is the sculptor, chiseling us into who we are meant to become. What we once perceived as punishment may, with time, reveal itself as preparation. What we once resisted may prove to be the very thing that strengthened us. When the veil of hardship is lifted, we see that every difficulty was carrying within it the elements of our transformation. To deny difficulty is to deny ourselves the chance to grow. To accept it is to embrace the raw materials life provides for the building of our inner strength, wisdom, and depth. Trials carve depth into the human spirit and strip away illusions. They arrive uninvited, unsettling the rhythm of our lives, dismantling the order we cling to, and exposing the fragility of the structures we believed would protect us. At first, they feel like assaults, as though life has turned against us. Yet hidden within their harshness is a strange gift. They deepen us. They cut through the surface layers of our existence, breaking apart the illusions we carry, forcing us to see with clearer eyes, and leaving behind a spirit more grounded, more resilient, and more awake. Illusions are comforting. They shield us from truths we are not ready to face, offering the temporary security of denial. We imagine permanence in what is fleeting, control in what is uncontrollable, certainty in what is uncertain. These illusions become the scaffolding upon which we build our lives, convincing us that we are stable, secure, and unshakable. Trials arrive like storms that tear through this scaffolding, exposing its fragility and revealing the uncomfortable truth. Nothing external is truly permanent, and control is far more limited than we dare admit. Though painful, this stripping away is necessary. Without it, we remain shallow, living in a fragile dream world that collapses at the first tremor. When trials strike, they strip us down to essentials. They remove the distractions, the pretenses, the masks we wear to appear strong, successful, or unbroken. In their place, we are confronted with the rawness of our humanity, our fears, our vulnerabilities, our unhealed wounds. Though this confrontation can feel unbearable, it is also liberating. To see ourselves without illusion is to stand in truth, and only in truth can depth be born. Depth is not created in comfort or ease. It is formed in the crucible of suffering, where we are pressed to discover what lies beyond the superficial layers of our identity. Trials also teach us about endurance. They show us that we are capable of surviving what we once believed would break us. Each time we walk through fire and emerge, scarred but alive, we gain a deeper sense of strength that cannot be taken away. This strength does not come from ignoring pain or pretending it does not exist. It comes from meeting it honestly, walking with it, and allowing it to shape us. It carves into the spirit the knowledge that we are far more resilient than we imagined, that the human heart can hold sorrow and still beat, can endure loss and still love. The depth carved by trials allows us to perceive life differently. We become less enchanted by the glitter of surface-level pursuits, less seduced by illusions of perfection. Instead, we learn to value authenticity, connection, and meaning. A person who has walked through trials carries a certain gravity, a quiet wisdom that cannot be faked. Their depth allows them to see beyond appearances, to recognize suffering in others, and to extend compassion where before they might have judged. The very wounds carved by trials become openings through which empathy flows. At the same time, illusions must fall away for us to grow. The illusion of control is often the first to go. We realize that no matter how tightly we plan, life will unfold according to its own rhythm. The illusion of permanence follows, as trials remind us that everything external, possessions, status, even relationships, can change or vanish. In losing these illusions, we may feel exposed, but we also gain a clearer sense of what is real, the strength of the inner self, the capacity for love, the resilience of the spirit. This stripping away is not cruelty, though it often feels that way. It is life's way of awakening us from falsehoods, calling us to live in alignment with truth rather than illusion. Each trial dismantles a layer of pretense, and though we resist, the process leaves us with something more enduring than comfort: authenticity. We emerge not lighter in the sense of having avoided pain, but lighter because the unnecessary burdens of illusion have been lifted from us. Thus, trials carve depth into the human spirit, not by granting ease, but by forcing us to shed what is false and to stand firmly in what is real. They remind us that the surface of life is fragile, but the core of the human spirit, once revealed, is unbreakable. In this way, trials become the chisels of transformation, shaping us into beings of depth, truth, and resilience. Life does not provide what we want. It provides what is necessary for our becoming. This truth is difficult to accept because human beings are creatures of desire. We imagine futures filled with comfort, success, and ease. We create lists of what we want to achieve, who we want to love, how we want our lives to unfold. When reality refuses to align with those carefully crafted desires, disappointment and frustration arise. Yet beneath that disappointment lies a deeper wisdom. Life is not designed to satisfy every want, but to sculpt us into what we are meant to become. The very experiences we resist often hold the exact conditions required for our growth. Wants are often shaped by comfort, by the need for security or pleasure. But what we want is not always what strengthens us. A child may want only sweets, but a wise parent withholds them, knowing that growth requires nourishment, not indulgence. In the same way, life withholds what is merely pleasant when it would hinder our deeper development. What it gives us instead, loss, failure, challenge, delay, may feel cruel, but these are the ingredients through which resilience, wisdom, and depth of character are born. Think of the countless times a closed door redirected the path of a life. The job we did not get, the relationship that ended, the dream that crumbled. At first, these feel like betrayals of our desires, but with time, they are often revealed as necessary detours, guiding us toward a self we would not have discovered otherwise. Life does not deny us out of malice. It redirects us out of necessity. It is less concerned with what we want in the moment and more concerned with what we are becoming in the long arc of our existence. The necessities life provides are rarely wrapped in ease. They arrive in the form of trials that stretch us, confrontations that expose us, and losses that humble us. These are not what we ask for, but they are what we need to awaken the dormant strength within us. Without hardship, courage would remain untested. Without loss, gratitude would remain shallow. Without uncertainty, faith in ourselves and in life would never take root. The very experiences we would never choose voluntarily often prove to be the ones that define us most profoundly. Our wants are tied to the surface self, the self that seeks recognition, achievement, comfort, and certainty. But life addresses the deeper self, the one concerned with growth, meaning, and authenticity. Life seems to know that if it granted every wish, we would remain undeveloped, clinging to illusions of permanence and control. By denying certain wants, life removes the crutches that prevent us from walking on our own. It compels us to discover hidden resources, to cultivate patience, to surrender control, and to embrace transformation. When we look back on our journeys, we often see this clearly. The moments we thought were detours became the true path. The events we resisted most fiercely became the ones that shaped us most deeply. The necessary is rarely comfortable, but it is always purposeful. It chisels away what is false, strips down what is unnecessary, and leaves us with a self that is more resilient, more awake, and more aligned with truth. To accept that life provides what is necessary rather than what is wanted is to move from frustration into trust. It does not mean we stop desiring, for desire is part of being human. But it means we hold our desires lightly, knowing that life's wisdom may deny them in order to give us something greater. Every disappointment can then be seen not as a punishment, but as preparation. Not as a theft, but as a gift in disguise. In this way, life becomes less of an adversary and more of a teacher. Its lessons may be hard, its methods often stern, but its purpose is unmistakable, to guide us into the fullness of our becoming. What we want may satisfy us temporarily, but what is necessary transforms us permanently. And so, life withholds, reshapes, redirects, not to deprive us, but to awaken us to who we are meant to be. Freedom begins the moment we stop demanding control over the uncontrollable. Much of human suffering arises not from what happens, but from our refusal to let life be what it is. We cling to the illusion that if we plan carefully enough, strive hard enough, or guard ourselves tightly enough, we can keep chaos at bay. We want certainty in a world that is fluid, permanence in a world that is transient, and predictability in a world that thrives on change. Yet no matter how fiercely we grasp, life slips through our fingers, reminding us that control is far more limited than we imagine. It is only when we release this endless demand for control that a new space opens within us, a space of freedom, peace, and inner clarity. The desire for control is rooted in fear. We fear the unknown, the unexpected, the possibility of loss or pain. By trying to control everything, we hope to shield ourselves from vulnerability. But paradoxically, the tighter we cling, the more anxious and fragile we become. Life resists being bent entirely to our will, and in that resistance, our suffering deepens. To demand control over the uncontrollable is to wage war against reality, a war we are destined to lose. Acceptance, by contrast, is not defeat, but liberation. It is the recognition that while we cannot dictate the unfolding of events, we can choose how we meet them. True freedom lies in discerning what belongs within our sphere of influence and what lies beyond it. We can choose our actions, our attitudes, our words, and our responses. We cannot choose the passage of time, the inevitability of change, or the decisions of others. Yet so often we pour our energy into trying to control those very things that are untouchable. We chase after permanence in relationships, security in circumstances, and certainty in outcomes. When they inevitably shift, we feel betrayed. But life never promised control. It promised only the unfolding of experience. When we stop demanding control, we rediscover our capacity to live fully in the present. Worry and anxiety are rooted in the attempt to control what has not yet arrived. Regret and bitterness are rooted in the attempt to control what has already passed. Both pull us away from the only place where life truly exists, the present moment. To release the demand for control is to return to now, to live with open eyes, and to embrace the reality before us without constant resistance. This freedom does not mean passivity or indifference. It does not mean abandoning responsibility or effort. On the contrary, it means pouring our energy into what truly matters, our choices, our character, our inner life, without being consumed by what lies outside our reach. It is the strength of the sailor who cannot control the wind but can adjust the sails, the wisdom of the gardener who cannot control the weather but can tend the soil. Such freedom is active, not passive. It aligns us with reality instead of placing us in endless conflict with it. When we stop demanding control, we also open ourselves to wonder. Life, when not rigidly confined to our expectations, begins to surprise us. Unexpected opportunities, connections, and insights appear when we are no longer trying to force everything into a predetermined shape. As the uncontrollable, instead of being an enemy, becomes a source of mystery and possibility. In surrendering control, we do not lose life. We gain a deeper intimacy with it. At the heart of this freedom is trust. Trust that even when events do not bend to our will, they can still serve our growth. Trust that we are resilient enough to endure uncertainty. Trust that we can find meaning even in what we did not choose. This trust is not blind optimism, but a recognition of reality. Life will unfold regardless of our attempts to bind it, and our true power lies not in control, but in response. Thus, freedom begins not in domination, but in release. It begins when we cease our endless struggle to command what lies beyond us and instead turn inward to cultivate strength, clarity, and acceptance. In doing so, we are no longer imprisoned by fear, anxiety, or disappointment. We stand open to life as it is, grounded in the only freedom that cannot be taken away, the freedom of how we choose to meet the uncontrollable flow of existence. Walking in rhythm with life leads to peace, strength, and self-discovery. So much of human struggle comes from resisting the natural flow of existence, from pushing against what is, and from demanding that life conform to our rigid expectations. We hurry when life asks us to be still. We cling when life asks us to release. We demand clarity when life offers mystery. This constant resistance exhausts the spirit and leaves us feeling fractured, restless, and perpetually dissatisfied. Yet when we begin to walk in rhythm with life, moving with its seasons, its ebbs and flows, its unfolding timing, something within us shifts. We discover a sense of peace, not born of control, but of alignment. We uncover strength not built on rigidity, but on adaptability, and we stumble upon aspects of ourselves that would have remained hidden had we not learned to walk in step with the larger dance of existence. Life itself has a rhythm. Nature reflects it everywhere. The rising and setting of the sun, the waxing and waning of the moon, the growth and decay of the seasons. There are moments of expansion and moments of contraction, times of abundance and times of loss. When we fight these natural rhythms, insisting that it always be summer in our lives, we create unnecessary suffering. But when we recognize that winter has its role just as much as spring, we begin to move with the wisdom of life rather than against it. Peace arises when we allow each season to be what it is, trusting that none of them are final and all of them contribute to the greater whole. To walk in rhythm with life also means to honor the timing of our own journeys. We live in a world that glorifies speed and constant progress, but not every step forward can be rushed. There are times when growth requires stillness, when healing asks for patience, when understanding takes shape only slowly. When we force ourselves to move faster than life allows, we fracture under the weight of our own demands. But when we surrender to the pace that is truly ours, we discover strength in patience and the resilience to endure. This rhythm also teaches us balance between action and surrender. There are moments when life calls for boldness, for stepping forward with courage and determination. And there are moments when life asks us to release control, to trust the unfolding, and to wait with openness. Walking in rhythm means recognizing when to act and when to rest, when to build and when to let go. In this balance, we conserve our energy, cultivate wisdom, and strengthen the core of who we are. Peace, when we walk in rhythm, comes not from the absence of challenges, but from the absence of resistance to them. Challenges still arrive, losses still occur, uncertainty still lingers. But instead of meeting these experiences with denial or rebellion, we meet them with acceptance, adjusting our steps to the changing tempo of life. This adaptability is strength, the strength to endure storms without breaking, to bend without shattering, to continue walking even when the path shifts beneath us. Walking in rhythm with life also invites us into self-discovery. When we are not consumed by the struggle to control or resist, we become more attuned to the subtler movements within us. We begin to notice our inner voice, our authentic desires, our true capacities. We discover parts of ourselves that were hidden beneath the noise of resistance and the strain of constant struggle. The rhythm of life becomes not only an external guide, but an inner compass, pointing us toward deeper self-awareness and alignment. In learning to move with life rather than against it, we uncover a paradox. Surrender does not weaken us, it strengthens us. Trusting life's rhythm does not diminish our individuality, it reveals it more fully. The river of existence carries us forward whether we resist or not, but when we learn to move with its current, we no longer flail in exhaustion. We swim with grace, with purpose, and with awareness of who we are becoming. Thus, to walk in rhythm with life is to live in harmony with reality itself. It is to recognize that peace is not found in forcing the world into our image, but in attuning ourselves to the deeper music it is already playing. It is to find strength not in control, but in adaptability. And it is to discover ourselves, not as static beings, but as ever-evolving participants in the great unfolding dance of life. Silence is not emptiness. It is the space where truth quietly emerges. In a world filled with endless noise, both external and internal, silence is often misunderstood. People fear it, equating it with absence, with loneliness, or with a void that feels unbearable. They rush to fill it with words, with distractions, with sound and movement, as though silence itself were a threat. Yet silence, when embraced rather than avoided, reveals its true nature. It is not empty at all. It is alive, fertile, and transformative. In silence, we encounter what noise conceals. In silence, we discover the truths that cannot be spoken, but only felt. When silence falls, the first thing we notice is discomfort. The restless mind begins to chatter, desperate to escape the stillness. Thoughts race, memories surface, anxieties grow louder. It feels as though silence is amplifying the chaos within us. But this is not emptiness. It is the unveiling of what has always been there, hidden beneath the constant hum of distraction. The more we resist, the louder it becomes. Yet if we sit with it long enough, something subtle begins to shift. The noise within settles, the frantic edges soften, and then, within the quiet, truth begins to rise, not forced, not demanded, but gently revealed. Silence creates space for us to hear the voice of our own being. It is in silence that we learn who we are when the masks are removed, when there is no audience to impress, no role to play, no script to follow. The truths of our desires, our wounds, our fears, and our hopes reveal themselves in these moments of stillness. Noise keeps us distracted from ourselves. Silence confronts us with what we carry inside. And in that confrontation, clarity emerges. What seemed hidden becomes visible. What seemed confused begins to align. And what felt overwhelming transforms into something we can face with honesty. This is why, many traditions throughout history have turned to silence as a path to wisdom. Philosophers, mystics, poets, and seekers of every kind have discovered that in silence, the deepest truths of existence make themselves known. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something greater, an openness that allows us to hear beyond words. In stillness, we begin to sense patterns we missed, connections we ignored, and meanings that eluded us in the rush of daily life. Silence also teaches humility. In silence, we realize how much of life is beyond our control, how much lies outside the reach of language or explanation. We are reminded that not everything needs to be spoken, solved, or defined. Silence shows us that truth is not always found in analysis, but in presence. It is in the quiet moments, the pause between thoughts, the breath between words, that we glimpse reality without distortion. Far from being empty, silence is full. It holds the weight of everything we avoid, the essence of what we truly are, and the potential for transformation. It is the space where healing begins, because in silence, pain is finally heard, rather than drowned out. It is the space where creativity takes root, for the mind unburdened by noise becomes fertile ground for new ideas. It is the space where connection deepens, for in shared silence with another, words are unnecessary. Presence itself becomes enough. Walking into silence requires courage, because it means facing ourselves without distraction. Yet once we cross that threshold, we discover that silence is not a void to fear, but a sanctuary to embrace. It is the ground upon which truth emerges, not with thunder or spectacle, but with a quiet certainty that reshapes us from within. Thus, silence is not emptiness. It is fullness disguised as nothingness, clarity disguised as stillness. It is the space where illusions dissolve, where the noise of the world fades, and where truth rises quietly, steady, unshakable, and real.